All right, Nipsey Hussle, for those of you that don't know, was a rapper, entrepreneur, community activist, and he was brutally shot and killed in broad daylight at the age of 33 last month in front of a store that he owned in the Crenshaw neighborhood of LA in California. I remember first stumbling upon Nipsey Hussle by randomly clicking on a Breakfast Club interview. I like watching a lot of different interviews, whether I know the person or not. And it was one of those interviews I clicked on to see who this dude was. I would say maybe like a year ago, maybe a little bit more. I think he's been on the Breakfast Club a couple times, if I'm not mistaken. But the video that I'm referring to is the one where he's wearing like a red hoodie. So whenever that one came out, and I remember being like so intrigued with the way he thought, the way he came off as this like gangster hood dude for sure. But that was like secondary to a person that was wise and knowledgeable and just beyond his years. The stuff he was talking about in terms of tech and cryptocurrency and the way he envisioned the future and paths to betterment for himself and his community and empowerment was dope. And it wasn't just the substance behind that stuff, but the juxtaposition of who it was coming from. As a self-admitted gang member from Compton, member of the Rolling 60 Crips. Yeah, on the flip side of that, he's speaking about mental clarity and meditation and eating right and bettering yourself so you can help others. Speaking about ownership, investing in the tech space, investing in real estate, building long-term wealth. That's just a lot of positivity and, to me, dopeness coming from someone that I would otherwise, I guess, as part of my own bias, just expect to hear more of a short-term, get money, get rich, get cars, get hoes, go to the strip club, etc., type of rhetoric from. And I guess that's like what made him so dope to me as a person, as far as his interviews, is that like his appearance and your expectation going in is one thing, and he takes you, someplace completely different, while still knowing that other thing, that gangster side of him, that gang life that he grew up in and he was raised up on, was very much so a part of him that you couldn't unravel and separate from the person he was. But it was just a part of who he was. I know it's like beating a dead horse with how much I like say this on this podcast, but we're all multifaceted individuals. We're very layered. We're very nuanced. Nobody's just one thing, or two things, or three things. And I think Nipsey like embodied that. He was like a microcosm of that. And it was sad, man. When I first heard, I know I was on the computer, but I can't remember if I was either writing or just finished podcasting or just doing like website work and shit like that. But I was at the computer and I grabbed my phone, like we do when we procrastinate and shit. Check your email, check Instagram, Twitter, shit like that for a couple minutes, then go back to doing whatever it is that you're doing. And like I opened up Instagram, and the first post that I saw was a picture of Nipsey, and it was Nas that posted it, and he wrote a caption and said rest in peace, and I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, nah, I can't believe that. And like I googled it, and it was like a couple hours before that I just like broke that. that news, and then the rest is history. It was, everywhere from there on out on all the social medias, and more information came out. And I don't know, I just want to share a few things that resonated with me about Nipsey, some positive shit about him, and yeah, it's just some stuff that I thought was worth sharing with folks that may not have known. So like I said, I first saw that Breakfast Club interview, and since then I've seen like at least half a dozen hour to 2 hour long interviews with him. And whether it was on Hot 97, the Rap Radar podcast was dope. He did Steph Curry from Golden State. He has like a YouTube podcast interview show. He was on that. I saw the Breakfast Club one a couple times prior to him passing, and then again after he passed. And he came off to me as like the old man in the movie, that he was just like an OG, and he knew what was going on, and he knew more than all the other characters in the movie, and just like dropped gems on the protagonist of the movie. Yet he was still young. He was 33 years old, 31, 32 in these interviews that I was watching. And he just came off as like wise. I don't know. He like exuded that. Now, a few dope things that I read that he did in the community as far as giving back was doing things like repaving and cleaning up parks and playgrounds, buying students sneakers for like going back to school. He invested in real estate in his neighborhood. And by his neighborhood, I mean the Crenshaw neighborhood that he grew up in southern Los Angeles. I read an article, just one article, so I'm not sure how much stake you want to put in it, but an article saying that in some of his real estate investment, he gave homeless people a place to live. I don't know if it was like by renting it to them cheap or what, but it also said that he gave homeless folks jobs. One of the parks that were completely rehabilitated in the neighborhood was by way of a partnership / sponsorship that he had with Puma, the sneaker company. And he worked that into the deal. And the Puma deal came about because of a Reebok deal, a proposed Reebok deal that he had the opportunity to sign on to, but wound up turning down because they wanted to promote a Reebok shoe with like blue coloring on it, and add a Rolling 60 logo to the sneaker, obviously appeasing to the like gangster, Rolling 60 Crip gang that Nipsey was known to be affiliated with, or part of rather. But he turned that down, saying, that he didn't like speak for the gang. He wasn't like the, leader of the whole gang or something like that. Like, it wasn't his creation. He was definitely a part of it, but there's people serving life and 100 years and stuff like that in jail. And what would he look like if he took a check for like capitalizing on that name? And he turned that down and wound up doing the deal with Puma, which obviously equaled money in his pocket. Just a smart move by him. Good on him. But a direct impact to his immediate community is a dilapidated park was completely revamped, and I'll link to like pictures of it in the episode notes, and I think that actually a video of it in the episode notes. It's like a dope looking park and playground with basketball hoops and like muraled art on the walls, which is dope to have, especially off the strength of a popular rapper being able to broker that deal into existence. Something else I thought was dope is that he used to sell mixtapes. He always did like made his own music and used to sell mixtapes out of his car, or so the story goes, out of a specific strip mall in Crenshaw on Slauson Avenue. And the like owners of like the stores within that strip mall used to like call the cops on him all the time and chase him out the parking lot and stuff like that for solicitation. And he wound up buying that strip mall and all the stores within it and becoming the landlord there now, or prior to his passing, obviously. And he made one of the, which is like just dope in and of itself, right? Like, I mean, it's probably not the same ownership that used to like run him out of there when he was younger, but if it is, it's even more romantic of a story. But it's still dope to be able to say, you know what, now I own this shit and I can be here whenever I want. Those businesses obviously employed people from the neighborhood. He had a clothing company called Marathon Clothing that he started, and the flagship store was he put in that strip mall, which is actually a strip mall where he was shot and killed in front of. There was also an app that people could use when physically shopping at a store to enhance the experience somehow, the shopping experience. And like I mentioned before, he was like into technology. I read an article saying that when he was a bit younger, he like built a computer from top to bottom. He taught himself how to be able to record and produce his own music. He was an investor in tech companies and in cryptocurrencies. There was a couple that he mentioned specifically in his, I believe it was the Breakfast Club interview that he invested in, because he felt bad he kind of like missed the boat on the Bitcoin wave. He owned the rights to his music, meaning his masters, and he put out a bunch of projects like mixtapes himself. But his debut label album called Victory Lap came out last year, and it was up for a Grammy for Rap Album of the Year. That's how dope it was. And I remember when it came out, well, after watching the interview, when he was doing that like press run, it was when he was promoting the Victory Lap album. I remember downloading it, checking it out. I thought it was cool. Thought it was good. But something that I would listen to again, but hadn't gone back to it. But I've been playing it a lot since he died, and it really is a dope classic album. I can see why it was up for a Grammy. Cardi beat him out for the Grammy. Shout out to Cardi. But it really, really is a good album. He has a track with Kendrick, and in Kendrick's verse, he says that one of his boys told him, "Yo, you're gonna do a song with Nip? That boy's a Crip." And Kendrick goes back to him, telling him, "Yeah, he is, but he's a man first, and listen to the positivity coming out of him." He's talking about positivity and empowerment and betterment, etc., etc. Obviously much more lyrical and doper than I just said it, but it's definitely fitting. And he has a lot of like hard lines, some dope bars that I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I know I won't do it justice, so definitely check out the album. It's called Victory Lap. My favorite thing, and what I found like most impressive of his like entrepreneurship, is this building that he had of 2 floors, and to serve 2 distinct purposes. He recognized that his community, again, all the shit is in his community, which, by the way, is how you fix communities. It's how you build up communities. It's by investing money into them in tangible ways. It's how you uplift and help change communities for the better, with opportunities and access to different things that they're otherwise not exposed to. And his community, which is notoriously known for being riddled with gang violence and gang culture, that self-perpetuates itself because it's the premier culture of the area. And he spoke about seeing like the lack of infrastructure within his community for people that wanted to start businesses and just get something going off the ground. So he has this 4,700 square foot space that is 2 floors. The top floor is a co-working environment, which occupies the second floor, the top part. And he offered flexible short-term leases, daily passes, monthly memberships, private offices, and custom build-outs for teams needing personalized options. And I hear something like that, and I think of like the neighborhood that it's in, and it's a place like that in any neighborhood provides access to folks that don't have the capital to open up their own office space, for example. But in a neighborhood like Crenshaw and Compton, and these areas that we know to be like uber violent areas and have this negative stigma about them, it's that much more of a beautiful thing to me. And I'll give you guys a tangible example. I worked in real estate and mortgages for a long time, and I worked with a lot of people trying to, a lot of real estate agents. That's what you start off as, right? You take a real estate class, then you take a state exam, and you become a licensed real estate agent. And every 2 years, you have to do some like refresher trainings and stuff like that to keep your license active. But besides going through that process, after you have your real estate license, you have to find a sponsoring broker, which means an office to work out of, a broker to work with. A lot of folks, after having some success as being a sales agent, want to open up their own place. And especially starting out, a lot of them didn't have the capital to do so. And I know a couple of agents cutting deals with the brokers that they were working for, technically, that were getting a cut of all their sales, to let them use their office for their own gig, to let them do business basically in the broker's place of business, which obviously the broker's not incentivized to. And all of those deals wind up going sour. And if one worked that I can vaguely remember, it was to the tune of the agent that was trying to start off his own thing, getting raped financially by the broker, because again, it's not in the broker's best interest to fund the business of a now competitor, technically. So a space like this where you can, not have to sign a contract at the person's house, and you can bring them into a professional space by renting an office for a day or for a week or for whatever it is, can very much so make the difference between somebody taking you seriously and signing their house over to you for you to sell it for them in terms of a listing agreement, or somebody thinking, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's, doing real estate out of his bedroom at home. And that one deal that can gain you enough commission to, really lease out your own spot and start growing your client list and having that snowball into, one deal turns into another deal. And, the person that sold their house, a family member now wants to buy a house and they refer you to them, and that's how the shit works, right? So a space like this is so dope, and to have that flexibility in recognition of the neighborhood that you're in and the lack of financial resources within the neighborhood is a dope thing to be able to do. And again, in reinvesting in your neighborhood, that is a form of directly reinvesting in your neighborhood, and the ripple effects of that are truly limitless. Now, that's the second floor of this 4,700 square foot space. The first floor, which to me is even more impressive, was designed for the teaching and promotion of STEM programs. STEM standing for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it's a co-work space to try to connect young kids with jobs in the tech space. And they had workshops, and they taught things like coding and other computer language in an attempt to bridge the gap between this impoverished neighborhood and opportunities in the tech space. Now, this location was known as Vector 90, if you guys want to look it up. You know what the craziest shit is about the whole thing is that he was killed by a member of his own gang. If it was like a blood versus Crip, eternal beef type of thing, it would kind of even not be okay, obviously, but it would make sense. It would make more sense. Like, you live by the sword, die by the sword type of thing. You were in that life, you made that decision. It's a lifelong decision. Even though you're doing all this positive shit, that negative shit they did before caught up with you. It would kind of fit like that narrative. But it wasn't even that. It was, by all accounts of witnesses that were there, in the parking lot in front of the Marathon clothing store that Nipsey owned, in the strip mall that Nipsey owned in his neighborhood. This dude that was, his name is Eric Holder, that was, again, from Nipsey's same clique, supposedly came around, and he was known to being like a snitch or an informant or something like that, and they had some verbal words, and Nipsey told him that he's not welcome there, he shouldn't be around there, and told him that he should bounce or something along those lines. And the guy did. He left, and then he came back with a gun and wound up shooting Nipsey. All this was caught in surveillance, and you guys can watch that. I'm sure you can find it online fairly easily. And the dude, shot him 5 times, I believe, and then ran, and then came back and shot him again in the head, to make sure he was dead. Or he kicked him a couple times. And I think everybody thought that dude wouldn't make it alive. The streets were gonna find him before the cops did, because they didn't find him for a day or two. But they wound up finding him trying to commit himself to an not insane asylum, but a mental institution. So I'm guessing that's the angle he's gonna use in his defense. And what's even crazy on top of that? The next day after Nipsey was shot, the police chief and police commissioner of the LAPD had a meeting on the books with him to discuss on ways to help stop and prevent gang violence in the neighborhood, which I feel like their infrastructure and his influence and knowledge and perspective could have done good things within that vein. And it's sad that we weren't able to see that come to fruition. We got a glimpse of that, I would say, in the aftermath of his passing. There's another video that you guys can see online that I think went viral, where a lot of different not just Bloods and Crips, but a bunch of different sects and cliques and different gangs in the neighborhood, which would normally have a kill on sight type of mentality against each other, were all marching in unison in favor of stopping the violence and in memory of Nipsey. And I don't think anyone's naive enough to think that that's something that's going to last. The peace I'm referring to, when you're dealing with generations and generations of gang violence, that is now the fabric. It's embedded within the fabric of that neighborhood, the culture of that neighborhood. But it was still dope to see. and it shows that it's possible, you know. But yeah, man, it's a fucking big loss. R.I.P. to Nipsey Hussle.